Hi, it's Jennifer from Shabby Fabrics. This project today uses the awesome tool called the Olfa Chenille Cutter. And when I saw this rug made up, it's from Susie B, and this is Zoe the giraffe. And I saw this, and I hope you can see the texture behind it. It's the most wonderful rug. And I love the process of how this was made and how you use this tool. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So we'll go into how to use the chenille cutter a little bit later, but let me show you how to set the project up. This can work with any panel. So if you have not known what to do with panels in the past, you now have a whole new thing to do with panels, and I'm excited to do it with more things than rugs. It could be wall hangings, it can be really pillows, anything. So with this particular project, we want it to be for nursery. It's on the ground, it can be walked on, washed without issue. So don't worry about that, it's definitely made to be used. First thing that you'll do when you set this project up is you'll have your backing fabric cut to 1 1/8 yards. Of course, these measurements could be in our download. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, just do that now. We have so many projects planned for you and hundreds of videos to choose from already. But you'll want to have 1 1/8 yard of backing fabric, and we used a fusible fleece, also cut to 1 1/8 yard, and that is just ironed on to the back of your backing fabric. You will take 4 identical panels. Now this is a full yard panel. We have 4 full 1 yard panels. Let me show you how they're layered. You have one that's layered, and we've left the selvage on both sides, and it's larger. We've left that panel till it's full size, and the other 3 that are stacked on top of that are cut to be smaller than that. The reason being, let me show you how this is going to work, and this will make probably more sense of why the bottom panel is cut larger. Is the chenille cutter. We're going to create these long strips. We're going to sew these lanes, I call them. And with our chenille cutter, we're going to come and cut those lanes, but not the bottom fabric, of course, not the fusible fleece and not your backing. So for that reason, we want the most bottom panel to be larger so that you don't accidentally cut that. So that's going to be a very important step. As I said, we left the bottom panel larger with the selvage on, and with the 3 panels above, they're cut identical. We removed the selvage and made those panels about 1 inch smaller on the top and the bottom, actually really kind of all the way around. Once you have your fusible fleece ironed onto your backing, this side's not fusible. So you're going to spray base that. We use the June Taylor basting spray. There's other basting sprays. If you have one you like, use that. And you're going to spray your fusible fleece and lay this first layer down and get that nice and flat. Then the other 3 panels, the whole goal is to basically stack them one on top of the other so that they line up. They're one on top of the other with you can see here, that's in the exact same position. You spray base that. Here comes the next panel. You spray base that. Again, trying to get them stacked exactly one on top of the other. Spray base your final layer, laying that down. We used some of the flower head pins to assist us in kind of holding that whole sandwich together. We like the flower head pins because they're longer. I love to quilt with the clover patchwork pins, but they are shorter, and I want this thing to hold together, so I want a longer pin, and they have a flatter profile. So once you have your project pinned together, the first thing you'll want to do is you're going to establish your line. We went from this corner all the way to the other diagonal using our ruler, and of course you can't get that whole distance all at once. So we got our position, we're eyeballing that corner. If you're off by a few degrees, it's fine, no big deal. So you'll go ahead and draw that. This is our friction pen. We know that with the friction pen, with heat, that line will be removed, so don't worry about that. Now, when I typically have a line, I'm trying to draw a line, and it's beyond the length of my ruler. How I manage that is I slide my ruler up, not to the end of where I drew, but I keep some of it so I can true up my ruler to where I just was, and then I continue drawing. And again, where I just was, and then I continue going. You get the idea, all the way to that corner. Now, we sewed this on the Bernina, and we actually increased our stitch length from 2.5 is typically where we're sewing. We increased that to 2.75. You're sewing a lot of strips here. And it just seems like with the longer stitch length, it wants to pull the project along more. If you're on a Bernina, we're using the 1D, and with the dual feed. You definitely want, if you're on a Bernina and you have the dual feed system, use it, engage it. The only reason I don't have the Bernina is I didn't have space for the project and the sewing machine. So I know you needed a good look at the project here. So we used a 1D on a 2.75 stitch length. If you're sewing on a different machine, use a walking foot and adjust your stitch length to maybe be just a little bit longer. It helps pull the project along, and it'll just get done faster. As far as the width of the rows, once we sewed our line, our drawn line from point to point, we didn't actually draw any of the lines. What we used, this is the Bernina pressing foot. Your foot at home, maybe on a different type of machine, is not going to be different. There's typically a center line, and then you have your edge of your presser feet. That's the distance between the rows. So once I start over here, and I come down here and I'm sewing, and of course I've got that drawn line going right down the center of my presser foot here that's drawn, and I come down like this. I'm simply going to come around and I'm going to pivot, and the width, notice this, in fact I'm going to show you up here where you can see it more. You see how the width from that line to the edge of that presser foot is where you sew the next line, and you continue doing that all the way on one half of the quilt. What we did, because it takes up a lot of space, is we just rolled. It's probably not different than if you've done any kind of long arm quilting or top quilting on your own home sewing machine. You just have to roll things up and make it work. That's another reason we pinned. We didn't want anything to shift. So we kind of brought it to the sewing machine like this, with this in our lap, and fed it through. You will continue sewing these rows back and forth, weaving back and forth all the way till you have that portion done. Then you'll come back, starting at the middle again, and you're going to sew the rows back and forth until you're done on this corner. Then you get to come and use the chenille cutter. And I want to show you how to use this. It's really an intelligent tool. Let me say right away before I forget, I thought this would take a standard 45 or 60 millimeter rotary cutter replacement blade. It's actually a special chenille blade replacement. So if you do buy the cutter, you'll need to also get, if you dull the blade, and you will over time, because you're going to fall in love with making these rugs and everyone's going to want one, and you'll need blades over time. Be sure to get the chenille replacement blade. It's uniquely equipped for this. Let me show you how this blade works, and you'll see why it's different than a standard rotary cutter blade. On the dial itself, there's a black arrow and there's a red arrow. Let me show you around the tool itself. These are kind of shovels, where if you have a wider path, say you had a whole inch gap from one row to the next, which you could if you wanted to, you're going to use that wider shovel. And then as I rotate this around, that shovel's not quite as wide, narrower, and the narrowest is here. When you rotate the red portion, it says turn to select the guide. Now on the chenille cutter right now I have small. Now I don't have my glasses here. I do. Let me grab those. Make sure I'm telling you right here what it actually says. I have small, medium, large, and it looks like large, LL. So as you can see right now, that is set for large. My blade is open on that side, but not open anywhere else. You see that? That protects me so that I'm not cutting my hands as I'm using the tool. Now, for me, I think that one might fit, but it's a little bit snug and I want to be able to move freely down my lane. So I think that's the wrong size for me. So I'm going to keep going. So that's too large for me. So if I want to go and bring the blade over to the medium, first thing is let me check that. Let me see if that fits easily down that lane. It does. I like how it fills it, but it's not tight. So I'm going to go with the medium. Turn to select guide. So let's turn that. Let's keep turning it until the blade appears on that side. See it come into play and it clicked. It's there now. Now, these numbers around here, starting with 0 and all the way up to 22, 23, 24, what that is unlike a standard rotary blade, that as you use the rotary cutter, the blade rotates. You're using all 360 degrees of that blade. It's rotating. This blade is actually stationary. What that means and why that's significant is I keep using the same portion of that blade. As I'm cutting through my rows over and over, and I'm cutting a lot of fabric, 3 layers at once, that blade might get dull. For that reason, if that happens, see how I'm at the 0? I'm going to give it 1 click. And now I'm going to use a slightly different part, just a little bit of a turn, and now I have a fresh portion of that blade. And then as that gets dull, click. And you have 24 clicks before that's really dull and you need to replace the blade. That's why the chenille blades are unique. They are unique to this cutter, so make sure if you do pick up the cutter and you get a replacement blade, it is designed specifically for the chenille cutter. One other thing I want to show you or mention to you before we do the chenille cutting, and we found this really important, is when you sewed your lanes, you sew all the way not only to those top panels, but all the way to the edge of this and even slightly off. What that does is it keeps this part, it keeps the panel, that's the bottommost panel, the one with the selvage, down. The reason that's significant is if you didn't do that, it would be very easy to get the chenille cutter going and actually cut through all 4 layers, which at that point creates a lot of problem because the only thing left to see is actually your fusible fleece. If that we actually did do that, that is how we came to realize how important it was to stitch onto the selvage and to keep that down so that you have this opening here, but you're not going to be able to put the chenille cutter because it's literally stitched down. If that happens, simply open the channel. You might even want to pin it away, and we ended up doing a tight zigzag of the bottommost layer and trying to bring it back together. There is a way to remedy that, but if you follow the technique of sewing off of your fabric and onto the bottommost panel to secure that, you won't even have to worry about that because you won't do it. Now let's jump into that part. That's what you've been waiting for and the whole time, right? Now the first 2 rows I've already done. I'm on my medium. I've already determined that that shovel fits beautifully in there. And I'm just going to scoop this underneath there. Now I have my bottommost layers secured. Now I'm going to move this so that the overhead camera can see it. I'll try to step back so my head's not in the way. And I'm just going for the middle of that lane. And I'm going to pull back, creating a little bit of tension. How fun is this? So fun. Oh, I just love stuff like this. Okay, and look at that. Look how it went right down the middle. It opens those 3 layers up, and there's that bottom layer waiting there. Of course, you're going to continue, just that's the fun part. Cutting, I mean, the whole thing's fun, but of course, using the chenille cutter, you'll cut all your lanes. Then, at that point, what you'll do is you're going to square up your project. So you've got this piece out here, you've got these in here. You really want a clean edge. You're going to be adding binding to the project before you throw everything into the washing machine and chenille it. So at this point, once you have all of your lanes stitched, you have all your lanes cut, you'll come back to a nice large area where you can clean up your edges, and you're going to square up your project. You're going to lose maybe a ½ an inch all the way around. That's fine. The whole point is I would recommend you square one side and then square the opposite side so they're parallel, and then turn your project and clean up those other two edges. You'll bind as usual, and we do recommend using a machine binding. I don't recommend that you hand tack this down. This is going to get used. It is going to get washed. We went ahead and sewed the binding to the front, wrapped around to the back, and sewed it down. And then, of course, throw it into the washing machine and into the dryer, and it came out just like this. There was no clipping, there was no threads to be trimmed. It came out exactly like this. So I think this is a fantastic project. Of course, kits are available, and be sure to pick up the chenille cutter and any replacement blades. Those are available on our website.